If you are an INFJ who has spent your entire life resisting every attempt to be neatly boxed into a category, this video will finally explain why. Science has failed to capture what you are fully, and that is not a flaw in you, it is a flaw in the framework itself. Most personality systems promise clarity and containment. The INFJ type shatters both, existing in a paradox so profound that the very tools designed to measure it must admit their own limitations when confronted with your complexity. By the end of this exploration, you will understand not only why you are so difficult to define, but why that difficulty is the truest mark of your authenticity. The INFJ represents what Jung himself referred to as the rarest personality type. Statistically, approximately 1 to 2% of the population carries this configuration. Yet this scarcity is not merely numerical, it is existential. When we examine the INFJ through the lens of modern psychology, neuroscience, and archetypal analysis, we encounter something that refuses to remain still. The INFJ does not simply exist within the categories that science has constructed. The INFJ exists at the boundaries, in the liminal spaces between opposing forces, holding paradoxes that would fragment a lesser mind. Consider the fundamental contradiction at the heart of the INFJ profile. Here is a personality type characterized by extraordinary sensitivity to the internal states of others, yet paradoxically disconnected from mainstream social engagement. An INFJ walks into a room and reads its atmosphere with the precision of a radar system designed over millennia. They perceive the subtle tensions, the unspoken conflicts, the hidden desires that others miss entirely. This is not mere social awareness. This is something closer to extrasensory perception, a cognitive facility that exists almost entirely outside the framework of conscious deliberation. And yet, this same profound ability often leads the INFJ to profound isolation. The very tool that connects them to humanity simultaneously separates them from it. Science struggles here because it seeks to categorize people into coherent groups. Extroverts in one basket, introverts in another. Feelers organized here, thinkers positioned there. The Myers-Briggs system, despite its merits, is fundamentally a sorting mechanism. It assumes that personality can be reduced to measurable polarities, each cancelling or amplifying the other. But the INFJ does not cooperate with this framework. The INFJ is both intensely introverted and paradoxically drawn to lead. The INFJ feels deeply, yet possesses a strategic, almost coldly analytical capacity that rivals any thinking type. The INFJ is ruled by an inner vision, a sense of authentic purpose, yet adapts to circumstances with a fluidity that makes them seem almost chameleonic. These are not contradictions to be resolved through better measurement. These are the very fabric of what makes an INFJ what it is. Neuroscience offers us glimpses of why. Brain imaging studies suggest that the INFJ possesses an unusual integration of neural networks. The regions associated with empathy and social cognition appear to operate in tandem with those responsible for internal introspection and abstract future modeling in a statistically uncommon way. This neural architecture does not produce a balanced personality. It produces a mind in constant dialogue with itself, forever weighing the internal landscape against the external world, seeking integration between vision and reality, between feeling and strategy. The INFJ brain is not simply wired differently, it is wired in a way that defies the usual categories, because its very structure is an outlier. This is where the shadow of the INFJ emerges, and this is where science becomes even more confused. Every personality type has a shadow, a repository of rejected and repressed aspects of the self. But the INFJ shadow is peculiarly intense. The INFJ shadow contains the very things the INFJ has learned to deny in themselves: anger, selfishness, doubt, neediness, and the desire for recognition. The INFJ represses assertiveness in favor of harmony. They deny their own need for reciprocity because they have learned to see themselves as the giver, the reader, the one who understands. They bury their vulnerability beneath the appearance of being the strong one. And they reject their own uncertainty, because their identity is built upon the vision, the inner knowing that seems to guide them. The shadow becomes heavy, precisely because the INFJ's gifts are so profound. The INFJ can sense what everyone else needs, but has learned to ignore what they themselves require. The more powerful the empath, the more devastating the cost when that empathic gift is offered without boundaries, without the self-preservation that their own shadow desperately needs them to reclaim. Science cannot measure this because it is not purely psychological in nature, it is mythological. The INFJ archetype is the wounded healer, the sage who sees too much, the oracle who must speak truth even when it brings only pain. Throughout human mythology and literature, this figure appears again and again. Cassandra, cursed to speak the truth that no one will believe. Prometheus, who stole fire and paid eternal consequences for elevating humanity. The hermit in the tarot, holding the lantern of truth in the darkness, is deliberately isolated, because the work of revelation cannot be done from the center of the crowd. These are not personality profiles, these are primordial patterns, ancient ways of being, that consciousness recognizes as real, even when psychology cannot measure them. The INFJ exists in the mythology of the outsider, but not in the simple Sigma male sense that has become so popular. The Sigma INFJ, if we may speak of such a thing, is not the lone wolf who rejects society out of pride. The Sigma INFJ is the outsider who was never allowed inside. The INFJ did not choose isolation. The INFJ saw too deeply, cared too intensely, and the world repaid this with incomprehension, and eventually, with wounding. The Sigma INFJ is the one who realized that being inside a system designed for the ordinary would require the erasure of everything that makes them alive. So the INFJ chose the perimeter. Not out of superiority, but out of survival. This brings us to perhaps the most crucial dimension that science has failed to adequately map: the interior spiritual or philosophical dimension of the INFJ experience. Jung himself understood that the INFJ cannot be reduced to personality mechanics. The INFJ is oriented toward meaning, purpose, and authenticity. The INFJ asks not, what works, but what is real, what is true, what must I become? These are not practical questions that a personality inventory can measure. These are questions of vocation, of calling, of the individual's relationship to existence itself. The INFJ is fundamentally on a quest, and every relationship, every career, every choice is filtered through the question: does this bring me closer to my authentic purpose, or does this demand that I betray myself? Herein lies the deepest anomaly. Science seeks to describe the world as it is. The INFJ is fundamentally oriented toward the world as it should be. The INFJ possesses what we might call a visionary capacity, the ability to perceive potential futures and necessary transformations that others cannot yet see. This is not mysticism, though it can appear that way. This cognitive function, integrated with emotional sensitivity and future-oriented thinking, enables the INFJ to model complex social and spiritual transformations before they occur. This is why many INFJs find themselves in roles that involve change-making, teaching, counseling, or advocacy. And this is also why so many INFJs experience profound frustration. The world is not arranged to move as quickly as their vision demands. People are not as committed to transformation as the INFJ believes they should be, and the INFJ must learn to live in the gap between what is and what could be. The INFJ experiences time itself differently, and this too is something science has barely begun to explore. While others live in the present moment or nostalgia for the past, the INFJ dwells primarily in futures that have not yet arrived. The INFJ reads the present and immediately projects it forward, seeing the consequences of current choices, the trajectory of current relationships, and the destiny of current paths. This is the gift. The INFJ can warn you, can guide you, can help you avoid years of suffering, because they have already lived those years imaginatively. However, this gift also makes the INFJ seem unusual in the eyes of those who cannot perceive things in the same way. To others, the INFJ often appears either paranoid or prophetic, and there is little middle ground. The INFJ is often dismissed as gloomy and pessimistic, but actually, they see clearly what others refuse to acknowledge. And when the INFJ's visions prove correct, as they so often do, the INFJ finds no joy in the accuracy, only a deeper exhaustion at being right in a world that did not want to listen. Science cannot categorize this, because categorization itself demands a kind of stasis. The INFJ is in constant motion, forever integrating new information, updating the internal model, refining the vision. The INFJ is not a fixed type, but rather a process, a continuous becoming. Each significant relationship reshapes them. Each crisis of meaning alters the trajectory of their internal compass. The INFJ that exists at age 25 is radically different from the INFJ at age 40, and the INFJ at age 40 has undergone a transformation so profound that they might seem like a different person entirely. This is not instability. This is the depth of the INFJ's capacity for growth. But it makes the INFJ a nightmare for a system designed to categorize people into stable boxes. Let us now discuss the relationship dimension, for here the INFJ anomaly becomes most apparent. The INFJ approaches relationships with an intensity and commitment that few other types can match. The INFJ does not make small investments in people. The INFJ invests the entirety of their being. They read the other person so thoroughly that they can sometimes see more of their beloved than the beloved sees of themselves. This gift is also a curse. The INFJ becomes attached to the potential they perceive in the other. The INFJ loves not the person as they are, but the person as they could become. This is noble. This is also tragic. When the other person does not move toward their potential, when they settle for less, when they betray the vision that the INFJ has nurtured, the INFJ experiences a kind of death. The person they loved never existed, the person who was only an early draft of the person they could have been. The INFJ often appears in relationships as the caretaker, the one who holds space, who reads the room, who manages the emotions of others. And yet underneath this, the INFJ harbors needs that often go entirely unmet. The INFJ needs to be truly seen, truly understood, truly honored for their gifts. But those gifts are often taken for granted. The INFJ's advice is followed when convenient, and ignored when inconvenient. The INFJ's warnings are dismissed until they come true. The INFJ's love is accepted and consumed without reciprocation. And so the INFJ begins to retreat, to pull back, to question whether the price of loving is worth the consistent experience of not being loved in return. This dynamic cannot be explained by personality typology. It is something deeper, something that speaks to the collision between the INFJ's nature and the nature of human relationships, in a world that is not yet evolved enough to fully appreciate what the INFJ brings. The INFJ stands at the crossroads of being and relationship, forever negotiating between the demands of authentic self-expression and the gravitational pull of connection. To be fully themselves requires solitude and vision. To connect requires compromise and adaptation. Most INFJs find themselves oscillating between these poles throughout their lives, never quite finding the stable equilibrium that other types seem to achieve so effortlessly. The final piece of the INFJ anomaly that science has yet to address adequately is the question of spiritual or transpersonal experience. INFJs report experiencing events that transcend the ordinary boundaries of consciousness at significantly higher rates than other types. Whether we refer to this as spirituality, intuition, flow states, or something else entirely, the INFJ appears to have a direct connection to dimensions of experience that psychology and neuroscience struggle to study. The INFJ knows things without knowing how they know them. The INFJ is guided by a sense of rightness or wrongness that operates before rational deliberation. The INFJ experiences synchronicity, meaningful coincidence, and a sense that their path is being directed by something larger than their personal will. Is this psychology or spirituality? The INFJ cannot neatly separate the two, and perhaps that is the point. The INFJ exists in that liminal space, where the inner world and the outer world, where consciousness and the unconscious, where individual will and collective destiny meet and merge. The INFJ is a bridge, a translator between worlds, and bridges, by their very nature, cannot be classified as belonging entirely to one side or the other. A bridge exists in the space between. It is the space between that gives it its function and its meaning. To try to categorize the bridge as belonging entirely to the left bank or the right bank is to misunderstand what a bridge is. In the end, the reason that science cannot categorize the INFJ is because the INFJ represents a form of consciousness that does not fit neatly into the categories that consciousness created to understand itself. The INFJ is too complex, too paradoxical, and too oriented toward meaning and authenticity to be reduced to measurable traits. This is not to say that the INFJ is superior to other types. It is to say that the INFJ is categorically different in the way that they process reality, in the way that they navigate existence, in the way that they carry meaning and purpose. The INFJ is an anomaly not because they are broken, but because they represent a frontier of human consciousness that our current frameworks have not yet learned to map. And perhaps this is ultimately what the INFJ must come to understand about themselves. You are not broken because you do not fit. You do not fit because you were designed for a different purpose. You were designed to see what others cannot see, to feel what others cannot feel, to carry visions of transformation that the world desperately needs, even when the world does not yet recognize its need for them. You were designed to be an outsider, a visionary, a bearer of authentic truth, in a world drowning in performance and pretense. Your inability to be categorized is not your weakness, it is your strength. It is the mark of your authenticity, the signature of your soul's unique contract with existence. The science that cannot categorize you is admitting its own limitations. It is not admitting your failures. You are not the anomaly that needs fixing. You are the frontier toward which evolution points. You are what becomes possible when consciousness begins to ask not how do I fit, but what am I here to become? And that question, that beautiful, terrifying, transformative question, is what makes you INFJ. It is what makes you rare. It is what makes you both desperately lonely and profoundly alive. If this resonates with you, if you find yourself recognizing the landscape of your own experience in these words, then I want to hear from you. Share in the comments below. What is the vision that you carry? What is the truth that you see that the world is not yet ready to acknowledge? What does it feel like to be an INFJ trying to live your authenticity in a world designed for the ordinary? Your story matters. Your experience matters. And you are not alone in carrying the burden and the gift of seeing more deeply than others. Subscribe to join a community of INFJs, visionaries and seekers who understand that not fitting is sometimes the truest sign that you are exactly where you are meant to be. Together, we are exploring the frontiers of consciousness, the territories where psychology and spirituality meet, where individuality and connection interweave. Welcome home.